Hello again. So today we're going to get into 18th century economics and agriculture in Europe. We're going to keep this rolling. This one might be a little bit longer because I need to keep these two things together because they're really going to kind of build. One thing that we really will see is the development. I call it the town, but really it's like major cities. You're going to see just an increase in these cities and the size of these cities, and these cities are all about trade, okay? Trade and economics. They are trade centers, they are economic centers. You see, this is actually London, some people hanging out, some laundry, smaller shops, people milling around all over the place. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff going on, okay? Now, who is running these cities? For the most part, they are upper class. Sometimes they're nobility. Sometimes it's a hereditary thing. I guess you could almost call them like minor nobility type stuff, but in general, they're the same people every year, and they're lower upper class, I guess we could say. However, there is a new, different kind of social standing here because we don't just have like peasants and nobles. This is much more complicated, okay, and a lot of it is based on your economic earnings. Okay, so at the top you do have the government officials who run everything. Now they might not be the most wealthy, but again, they run everything, so they're kind of important. All right, now below them you have like bankers and financiers and wealthier merchants and lawyers. Okay, so that's your next level. Then below them they call the petty bourgeoisie, which is like the lower middle class. So shop owners, shopkeepers, and smaller traders. Okay, might be a little bit more localized. Okay, then after that you have the laborers, gilded workshops and the people, doing some handicrafts. Artisans are actually going to take a little bit of a drop here. Okay, they're not going to be as common as they were prior. Okay. But so you're getting a more complex social structure. You're just getting a lot more variety here than you ever had before. All right, and the biggest of all the cities was London. In London, you have over 1 million people. It is tremendous. You see it. That's a map of it up top, and then below, a painting of it from the 18th century. The rest of the cities on your left there all have people over 100,000. Paris was probably over 200,000 or 300,000, I believe. They're the number 2 largest city in Europe at the time. And then all the rest of them have over 100,000 people. So you're seeing massive growth in these cities and towns. Now, the big issue, though, in these towns would be poverty, okay? And one of the big issues, because when you have lots of poverty, you, of course, have disease. But I mean, the numbers are just getting huge because people are flocking here hoping to get jobs. But the problem is the population grew so fast in the 18th century that there weren't enough jobs for all of the people, okay? Like, so for instance, beggars or homeless people in Vienna made anywhere up from 15 to 18% of their population in Vienna. In Bologna, it was 25%. In Mainz, it was 30%. And then in France and Britain, okay, by the end of the 18th century, upwards of 10% of their overall population were homeless. So what's the deal, okay? As I said, lack of jobs due to population increase. That is number 1, along with lack of birth control. Number 2 is not enough ability to get an education. Oh, sorry, that was an accident. Is really the main issue. And so there isn't a lot of social mobility. So that's the whole idea. Even though you can have different classes and multi-level classes, it's hard to move between them. It's hard to get an education. People are coming in from the countryside. And so with massive population increase and no jobs to fix them, lack of birth control, which was also an issue, and then lack of ability to get an education, like all of these things just fold into each other, and it's not good. However, there are going to be some folks that decide to make a little bit of a change. In the 16th and 17th century, you're going to get ideas that you get groups that actually want to help the poor, okay? And probably the main one was the Order of St. Vincent de Paul. There's the left, St. Vincent de Paul. He created an order of monks. And on the right, there were the Sisters of Charity, which was the female version or the nun version of that, okay? And they were very active in helping the poor as much as they possibly could. Okay, and so that was like the positive end of it, but sadly this was really only religious groups. The negative end was huge. The attitude that is of the upper class, of the people who really could help others, is that if you help the poor, you only encourage them to be lazy, and they'll just end up turning to crime anyway. We'll talk about that in class. And that if you give them aid, they'll never change. um, but again, the problem is there's so many like no avenues of success here that it basically set up just huge poverty issues. We are going to have crime issues, and we're going to talk about that. Um, it's pretty bad. It's really bad, and there are going to be some areas that we're going to talk about of cities that just become really, really rough. But there were people, particularly in religious groups, that were trying to help, and that is going to slowly change over time. Now, economics with this stuff going on in the cities are going to be huge, okay? And we're going to get some new developments in economics here that are going to be very, very important. And first is going to be actual money shortage, okay? Gold and silver will be in short supply, and so you will get the beginning of paper money to help ease this, and this is going to be very important. We'll talk about what backs it and what doesn't back it and all those types of things as well. But the idea that paper money is going to slowly but surely get involved. This is actually paper money from the 18th century, from the Glastonbury and Shepton Mallet Bank. Going to be very, very important, and we're going to start to see a shift. For now, we're just going to talk about that it was created. Now, the banks are really getting involved, and probably one of the best examples is the Bank of England. Okay, it's going to be huge, and they're going to do things like they'll receive deposits, they'll do exchange for currency. They're also going to loan money to the government. So the idea is that bonds, okay, government bonds as a way to raise money for the nation and as a way for people to invest, which is crazy. You never really had this before, okay? And this is a new deal. So this allows nations to develop capital. This allows banks to make money off of interest as well from the federal government. And then they will in turn get permission to give out those paper, the paper bills based on their credit rating. And so a lot of this is going to happen. This is actually a picture on the left of the Bank of England today. Now, the Amsterdam Bank that I've mentioned before in earlier videos, that's still the top bank, but other nations are now competing. And then we're also going to get your early industry, okay, and what we call cottage industry. And this is what we call, what you had is the putting out system, okay. Most textiles prior to this were, or actually during this, they're done at home or in shops. And that's for like your high-end stuff. Now the merchant is going to get involved. And you see on the bottom, this is basically how it's going to work. So the merchant is the one that's going to start it, and they're going to kind of end it, okay? They're going to procure, all right, the raw cotton, all right? And then after procuring the raw cotton, what they're going to do is go to the peasant, okay? And now peasants will either spin the cotton into thread, and then they'll take it to the weaver, who will make it into cloth, and then they'll take the cloth and go sell that to high-end dressmakers or something like that. And so the idea of putting out stuff is that they're putting out these finished products. Now, in some cases, for basic necessities, is that they will actually have the peasants make the finished goods as well. Okay, and what you do is you get paid per piece, per amount of thread that you spin, for amount of cloth that you weave, and it actually gives women and children a solid source of income, which will help lead to more equality later on. Now, we also have some inventions that are going to really help with the early form of industrialization, which we'll get to in one of our next videos. And this is going to be the basis for the textile industry. So the first up here, we have the cotton gin by Eli Whitney, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to seed and get cotton ready for turning it into thread, and you can do mass amounts of that. So that's crucial. And then you're going to get the water frame, which was water or horse powered. And what that does is it takes the raw cotton and it turns it into thread, okay, or yarn. And then John Kay, and that was created by Richard Arkwright. And then John Kay invents this little doozy over here, the flying shuttle. And you're going to see, okay, how this moves here. And you pull it back. And what this is doing is basically slowly but surely, if you look here, you're going to see the cloth being woven and slowly expanding, okay? And this is so much faster than regular weaving, and you're going to get massive amounts of this stuff being made. And so the early steps toward industrialization, all about textiles, because you know what? Everybody needs clothes. Still don't have pants, though. All right. Now, part of that's going to make this all work was an economic system known as mercantilism, which all revolved around the parent or mother country, okay? So the whole idea, as you see here, the colonies are going to provide raw goods, which the mother country will buy. Not for that much money, though. And then what happens is it rolls right around, and then they make manufactured goods, which then you sell back to the colonies. They're not happy because they have spend a lot of more money. They don't make as much as they have to sell. But the idea is that you need to maintain a trade balance within your own nation, okay, with these colonies that you have. And what the goal is to do, as you can see the money bags behind the queen there, is to allow the country to just gain in wealth. The problem is over time that's going to put strain on the colonies, and they're not going to like it, okay? And it's also going to hinder economic development, again, like I said, later on. But initially, it's something that can get these nations a lot of money right now, in the 18th century, and give them lots of opportunities. Okay, but now we are going to get the development of worldwide trade, though, and that's the whole idea with slavery providing the base for the labor. Okay, and we've talked about the horrors of slavery, but that is going to be the base of the labor. So now you have the colonies that are going to allow for, the raw goods to be present. All right. And then you get even more cities, particularly you're going to get cities like Bordeaux or Nantes and Marseille in France, Liverpool and Bristol in Britain, Lisbon and Oporto in Portugal. Those areas, these coastal cities, okay, because we want to bring goods in and out as much as we possibly can. And the big industries, of course, you have textiles, but sugar manufacturing and tobacco, and it's just everywhere. The stuff is everywhere, and Europe is going to get rich and thrive from this. Now, what really helps with all this economic stuff going on will be yet another agricultural revolution, because that is still the basis for lots of crops. What we are developing are higher yield crops, okay? In other words, you're making tons and tons and tons of these crops, okay, to sell. And then there are going to be a couple crops like alfalfa on the left, clover in the middle, where you're like, clover, yes, I'll explain, and turnips. Now, what are great about these crops, okay, is that they, one, act as ground cover so they can protect your soil when you're not planting your regular crops. Okay, that's one thing. And then, turnips you can eat, but alfalfa, humans can eat. Clover is good for animals. And all three of these crops put nitrogen back in the soil, okay, which is good because it allows the soil to recover. Okay, so better soil equals more crops, and now you've got um, the average meat consumption is going to go up because livestock gets fed, and this is going to be huge. And again, this is more stuff that you can trade and grow. It's really really impactful. And in order to do that, we have some early inventions. Okay, the first one was by Jethro Tull, and first was the idea of using the hoe, which actually breaks up ground better. But then you have this thing called the seed drill on the right, and basically this is pulled along by an ox or cattle or something, or even a horse. And what it does is it drives the seeds into the ground. Okay, and that's going to be really really important because it is also going to till the soil. So this is going to till the soil. This is going to drive seeds into the ground, so much larger areas can be put under to farm. And again, just boom, yields are huge. Okay, and we're going to get some newer crops that we use, which are going to be corn and potatoes. And corn and potatoes are really important because you can use them for lots of different things. You can grow lots of them. They're with potatoes are fairly nutrient dense. Like all of these things are really really important. And the thing is in a lot of areas they don't have great land. So for instance, Ireland, the peasants were driven off of their land into more minor or areas where the soil wasn't as good, and we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But hey, potatoes grow great. And so the population of Ireland is able to thrive because you can grow these crops in relatively marginal soil. So we have good soil stuff, we have bad soil stuff, everything's going pretty good. And then you're going to have something known as the enclosure movement. This is going to be very interesting, okay? Because in the enclosure movement, okay, what is going to happen in some nations, particularly England, Parliament is going to allow farmland to be consolidated under control of the noble. Okay, and what happens is that small farmers get pushed off their land because they can't make enough money. Okay, and everybody else becomes a tenant farmer. So like this is kind of like the death of the um, village and little rural areas because these crowns are trying to consolidate land. In some cases, you can almost say this is the beginning of what's the word I'm looking for? This is the beginning of the big factory farms and stuff like that, and that is going to start to change society a bit. Okay, so again, you see these areas, these plots of land are specifically under control of certain people, and that is going to alter life. And so we have massive changes in the economic world, we have massive change in the agricultural world, and we'll see more and more societal developments and changes now as we start to shift to the 1800s. Okay, guys, so I'll see you soon.